Okay, we can go live. So the meeting should now be live of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee meeting of September the 8th, 2020. Councillor Chapman, if you wish to turn your video off, I'm just asking that committee members.
It's going off now. I'm just coming in. I'm turning it off now, Chair.
Thank you very much. So the members of the committee who are currently present are myself, the Chair, Councillor Andrew Garrett. I have the Vice Chair, Councillor Michael Lilly, and then in alphabetical order, Councillor Debbie Andre and Councillor John Hobart. We're waiting on the attendance of Councillors Chris Quirk and Vanessa Churchman. I know both have sometimes had problems with connecting into meetings, so I won't hold us up for that. We'll move on with the business. We're also joined by various cabinet members and officers of the council. And I've had apologies from Councillor Hollis and also from Councillor Abraham, the cabinet member for this meeting. It may be that Councillor Whittle may not be able to join us as well. I should acknowledge that Councillor Tyndall, since his appointment to Cabinet, but though not necessarily an elevation, but certainly appointment to Cabinet, and to welcome Councillor John Hobart, who has been appointed to this committee, having left the Cabinet. And I look forward to having your expertise here, John, and perhaps some insight from the Cabinet side of things, it being so fresh. I should also note that Councillor Merwell, having resigned his group, means that he is no longer on this committee. I've not been notified of a replacement for him, and I am not aware if the IWELP appointment, Councillor Kennett, is on. If you are, then do put your video on. Otherwise, we'll be waiting on her. There are others trying to join as well, I know, from the chat bar. So first item of business is to confirm as a true record the minutes of the meeting held on 7th July 2020. I've been notified of one correction to the minutes to be made, which is that Councillor Jeff Brodie was also present for that meeting. Of course, that will be recorded formally in the minutes. I can see by vision that Councillor Lilly has his hand up. Councillor Lilly.
Yes, I just wanted to make a note that within the minutes on Appendix 1, I just use one example, but there's a number on item 5A6. It says this question was asked by Councillor Lilly in the meeting and an answer provided at that time, but there's actually no information in the minutes about that answer. So I just wanted to raise that can we in future, if we do actually have answers to questions at the meeting, they are actually minuted in the proper public record.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. That's duly noted, and obviously the minutes of this meeting will record in some way those answers as well, so they will get into our formal record. But a point well made. Otherwise, colleagues, are you satisfied that I may sign these minutes as a true record?
Yeah.
I see nods as assent, and I will do that now. It will take me a couple of seconds to just initial and then sign, so do bear with me. Those are duly signed, and with that I can note that Councillor Vanessa Churchman has also been able to join our meeting as well. Welcome, Councillor Churchman. And Councillor Jill Kennett as well has been able to join us, which is great. We've almost got a full turnout of those who are able to turn up this afternoon. So the next item of business is declarations of interest. colleagues, do you have any declarations of interest to make that aren't otherwise? Councillor Lilly.
Yes, when I think it comes under an item under the cabinet about PTEC, I wish to declare that I am a trustee director of White Community Energy.
Thank you for that. Colleagues, any other declarations of interest? There are none, so we shall move on. I note in the chat bar that Councillor Pieces are being advised to have the team software open and so that he can be invited in. I'm not sure if that's, he has now joined. That's great. Thank you for that. Our next item of business is public question time. Questions have to be submitted in writing. No oral questions can be taken. And for the first of our virtual meetings, this is actually a time where I have got a public question. It has been submitted from Cameron Palin on behalf of the Floating Bridge Stakeholders and Engineers Group. It is actually a question in many parts, but I'm prepared to take that and includes what is a second question as a supplementary, but is in many ways a question in its own right. It will take me a while to read this out, but I do have to read it. The questions are: has the Corporate Scrutiny Committee accounted for how the increased floating bridge expenditure and loss of revenue will add up to millions extra of taxpayers' pounds wasted over the next 30 years, enough to buy a few floating bridges, included but not limited to the ongoing cost of new parts wearing out and needing replacement much more often than on Floating Bridge 5, the lost revenue with the floating bridge out of service more often to replace these parts, for example, guide wheels plus breakdowns, the ongoing costs of all the extra staff needed to operate the pedestrian and car gates and to guide the floating bridge in, now about 200,000 per annum more than before the ticket collectors started, more than a 50% rise in staff costs despite many of the most expensive staff having left or retired. These costs will increase over time. The ongoing costs of the launch stroke Jenny boat when the floating bridge is out of service, currently £40,000 a month, and the costs of sea clear to push the floating bridge up to 14 days a month, up to 4 hours a day, if no solution can be found, and that is bracketed at £192 per hour. And that was a 5-part first question, and the second question was, what exactly is wrong with the hydraulics? Is it metal filings in the hydraulic fluid? If so, that is very dangerous as it can cause the hydraulics to fail and drop the prow suddenly or be stuck in a position that would be dangerous. Those are very detailed questions to ask, and in many ways are not necessarily questions just for corporate scrutiny, or would actually be questions for another body of the council or for officers. So I would hope that the stakeholders and engineers group do pass through to cabinet members and officers to secure answers. I cannot at this moment give any answers to that because of the detailed nature of those things, but I will assure Mr. Palin that we will get those answers. I expect some of the substance of those questions will come up in our debates later on. And I will make sure that responses are appropriately publicised, because a number of people will be watching in, of course, interested in the detail of those things, both public and media. Colleagues, that means there are no other public questions, so I will move on now to item 4 on our agenda, which is the titled COVID-19 Response and Recovery, Update on Current Issues. The main part of this agenda item will be to consider the paper that is going to Cabinet in 2 days' time, but I'd like to include on this an opportunity to consider any update from the Leader of the Council, the Cabinet Member and the Resources Stroke Deputy Leader, and indeed the Chief Executive, because of course this is, in many ways, although not moving as fast as it was earlier this year, there are still things that happen between meetings, and it's useful to get any updates. So can I invite you, Councillor Stewart, if there are any updates you would like to give to the committee at this time?
Yeah, yes, Chair. Just checking the audio. Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to almost immediately default to Councillor Hutchinson who has now been given the very specific task of managing the council's recovery plan. He's probably better placed to give you a level of detail. And I think that probably will be the most useful both to the public listening and obviously to the committee as well. So I'll default to Councillor Hutchinson and thank him for his presentation in advance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchinson.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. There's a huge amount of work, obviously, in identifying what we have already done in response to COVID-19 over the last few months, and even more on crafting a recovery plan which will take us forward for whatever the duration of this virus pandemic is. The report which is going to Cabinet is as comprehensive as we are able to make it, which is why it runs into 31 pages. I'm sure, Chairman, you don't want me to take through it line by line or even page by page. In many ways, it is self-explanatory. What we are aiming to do is to use this plan as a starting point, which is why it identifies where we've come from and where we are now. It is as up to date as we can make it, and I hope that Cabinet will endorse the recommendations in that report when it meets on Thursday. There are still, of course, many unknowns that are not listed in that plan, so the whole thing will have to be very flexible to cope with the kind of things that we might expect to see. There has been wide publicity of the various new COVID spikes that have occurred elsewhere in the country, fortunately not here on the island. And one of the key things of the plan will be to ensure, as a first principle, the absolute safety of the people living and working here. And because of that key thing, is one of the reasons why we will be asking Cabinet to approve the oversight of the plan by the Health and Wellbeing Board, as well as Cabinet. And that is because the Health and Wellbeing Board has various partners who will be working with us on the plan and are key contributors to the plan and the work that results from it. I have to say thank you to officers who've done a tremendous amount of work in pulling this first draft together. It's taken many, many hours of work, and also to my colleague Steve Hastings, who's been working with me on the political lead for this plan. We are aiming to update it regularly, at least every 10 or 12 weeks, but more often if something substantial happens that causes us to change tack. For example, we know that the furlough scheme is going to finish in about 7 weeks' time. We also know from the figures that have been given to government by many companies about the potential redundancies that are going to arise as a result of the cessation of the furlough scheme. We don't know, of course, what impact that will have on the island. I am seriously worried about the impact on our economy. And although we don't make specific mention of it in the plan, we are working really hard behind the scenes with ministers, and the leader is in contact with the Prime Minister to ensure that we have sufficient recognition in the financial aspects of our recovery. because of course it's very well creating a plan, but you need the resources to deliver it. And that's not just, of course, for the council. We are acting as the lead for the plan, but we recognise the cooperative work that will be done by our partners. So this is the first of the recovery steps, and as I say, we shall amend it as we need to, and we will try to overlay it with some more detail on a route which specifies actions in more detail in the various acts of the plan. And you will see from the appendix to the plan, there is an awful lot of work that needs doing across a whole range of areas. And that really, I think, is all I can say about it at the moment. It is clearly a work in progress. I think we've made a very good start with it, and it's something which is going to continue not only for the remaining life of this council, but beyond, until we get out of the difficulties we're in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson, for that. And you're quite right. This is not a short-term issue that we're dealing with. That this has got to have buy-in across the council in many ways, because it does have to last through into potentially a different situation on this council. And that's not to make a political point, but to recognise that whatever happens in May next year, assuming that we are able to have elections going ahead, and of course we did see elections cancelled earlier this year in many places. Hopefully we won't find ourselves in that situation, but we do need to know that there is buy-in for the longer term, at least on the main headlines, the principles and whatever. So for the committee, I think we're looking at, first of all, are all the principles absolutely the right ones for the authority? Is the evidence there, and the analysis to go with that? Then do the priorities look sensible at this stage? Are there any details around some of the initiatives that are prefigured in the report, so that we can give a view from a scrutiny perspective? So I'll open it up now to my colleagues, and I have Councillor Andre who has a question. Councillor Andre, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I would also like to express my appreciation, because I can see how much work has gone into this. It's only a relatively minor point. On page B6, quite rightly, it states collaboration with other partners in the public, private and community sectors has proven its worth in responding to the pandemic. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Also, under the option 1 on page B10 at 64, agreeing to seek partner views is one of the recommended options. I note on page B17 that the list of partners given doesn't include town and parish councils, and I would suggest that unless they are mentioned elsewhere, which I'm sure Councillor Hutchinson is about to tell me, that town and parish councils obviously would be in that part of that collaboration.
Thank you, Councillor Andre. Just to note that Councillor Lilly will have a question after this. So Councillor Hutchinson, please.
Yes, I can confirm that, of course, Councillor Andre. In fact, we have got a series of meetings set up with town and parish councils, and although we are leading on this, of course, we are very happy to accept input from all sections of the community, as well as town and parish councils. I would expect that each of the town and parish councils will have concerns that are relevant to their particular area, and that's fine. Those are the ones that we shall need to know about, and the plan itself has to remain flexible without getting too overwhelmingly impossible. I mean, you could put everything in, of course, and then nobody would ever read it or follow it. So we have to break it down. It's a bit like, you know, when you say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And yes, we regard town and parish councils in partners in this journey.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. And just for completeness, I will note that Newport and Carisbrooke now is styled as a community council, but I'm sure that is well known. That's helpful. Vice Chair, Councillor Lilly, you have just a moment. I've just seen that the Chief Executive has asked if we can make a quick comment to that question. So yes.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I think one of the reasons that we suggested using the Health and Wellbeing Board was not only because it brings partners together from across the island, but it also involves representatives of town and parish councils. So it means that we've got good representation at the highest level as well as on a regular working basis. So I think there's a plan to get good connectivity across all at different levels. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lilly, your questions.
Yes, just before I start on that, on town and parish council involvement, Rye Town Council now has a 5-year corporate plan, which is COVID resilient. So we're very actually proud that we've got that, and I will be sending you a copy. It was approved last week. The particular point of the first one, I've got a number of questions. The particular one I would like to start with is the Health and Wellbeing Board, because it's quite a significant move to bring this under them. I do have some concerns about that, because the key thing in your plan is these 3 pillars of community recovery, economic recovery, and place recovery. There seems to be a little bit of health recovery should be in there as well, right? But I suppose it's sort of integrated. But those 3 pillars, if you look at the makeup of the Health and Wellbeing Board, they have, you know, it's very heavily towards health.
Yeah.
There is not economic representatives there. There is the voluntary sector. In fact, I represent the voluntary sector on that board. You have got the town and parish councils, but through IWOC. There are others that are perhaps not through IWOC there. But the economic ones particularly are not represented, and they're extremely important, because the economic recovery pays for the rent. It's extremely important. It's the one that people are worrying about. You actually said we don't know how many jobs are going to be lost. So if I had a kind of recommendation on the makeup, was to make sure that you if you are going to have governance through that you perhaps co-opt or make sure there's representatives, particularly from the economic side, to actually balance that out, because you have all the health partners there, but you don't necessarily have some of the economic ones. So that was my particular point I wanted to make.
If you can respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point, Councillor Lilly. You would expect, as a cabinet member responsible for strategic finance, which means getting the money in and making the economy work, that I will be presenting reports to that board. But we have the leader also on the Health and Wellbeing Board. And I know that Cabinet overall is very cited on the importance of economic recovery. Without that, we can afford nothing else. Obviously, from the council's point of view, we shall want to make sure that we are putting in the right leadership and resources. And I have to say that will be dependent not just upon us, but upon what additional support we might find from government for recovery. that is not just peculiar to the island, but across the country, although we shall be using every means at our disposal to press the island's case, including things like the report from the IFS that said that we were likely to be in a more difficult position than most other local authorities. And of course, it's widely recognised that authorities with a lot of dependency on the leisure, tourism and hospitality industries, as we are, need to have that additional support. So we will be talking, obviously, to key economic partners, people like the Federation for Small Businesses, people like the Chamber of Commerce, and also for individual businesses and others that represent the elements of many other businesses like Visit Isle of Wight. So we're very much cited upon the need to include the right partners for that. And your suggestion of a potential additional partner, quite how we select one, I'm not sure, because there are at least half a dozen organisations that might have a claim for a place, but we shan't forget them.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hutchinson. The Leader of the Council, you wish to make a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Far be it for me to pick up the Vice Chair on the paper, because normally he reads them so thoroughly, but he probably saw that on page B5 and B6, that one of the proposals is that the Chair of the Economic Development Board be invited to join the Health and Wellbeing Board, and I think that probably addresses his point. And three things I wanted to say about rural health and well-being and how we are currently dealing with that. So there's a really good example. We deliberately went for the Health and Wellbeing Board to oversee the strategic direction of the recovery plan. Councillor Hutchinson has also rightly highlighted the programme of engagement we now have with town and parish councils, and also at a if you like, a more formal level that we've had through the tremendous work that's been done by the community hubs. And I would again echo the work for the officers such as Ian Lloyd and others, how we have developed tremendous health and wellbeing engagement. It's not just about the physical impact of this virus, there's an awful lot of mental health and wellbeing impact. So that's what we're already doing. And if any members or others weren't aware of that, opportunity there to pick it up.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Lilly, do you have further questions?
Yes, I mean, thank you for that. I think that the particular point I had picked up about the representation, but I wanted to make the point that even there you have actually got a very strong balance, because the Health and Wellbeing Board is that collaboration about health. And I think that I would like you to sort of make sure, because at the moment there would probably only be one person from the parish and town councils, one from the voluntary sector, one from economic, and then about 8 others from the public sector. So I'm just saying it's important to make that body a little bit more balanced, right? Within that, and that was my particular point that I wanted to make.
Yeah.
The other particular points that I'd like to raise, one is there is obviously been finance from the government to help with losses made particularly by local authorities, right?
Yes.
Such as the leisure centres, right, and others. There's a formula. I wish to highlight that there are a number of other kind of community-owned facilities, particularly former council premises, right, like West White Sports Centre, like Waterside, right, that are having to carry their losses, that they do not have any access at all. And they are really under threat, because they're going to have to carry about 9,000 or 10,000 loss a month whilst they get back. So I just really want to put that in, that there is some very vital community facilities across the island that are not a local authority but came from the local authority, right, which are going to have quite a lot of difficulty over the next 12 months and might not stand. So I just really wanted to emphasize that. So some of those, to put that into your mind, right, within that. The other particular last point was you on page B3 talk about the various strategies that are needed as part of this, and you emphasize the climate change strategy, which has been emphasized. I would like to ask a question about local food production. One of the things that came out of COVID is a lot of residents, particularly poorer residents, did not have access to fresh vegetables, right? A lot of the food parcels, a lot of the things that help, many actually were deficient of that, and there has been various things coming out of the World Economic Forum that there needs to be local food production strategies. We have got the local buy local work done by National Enterprise, which is in your plan, but I'm specifically saying that we do need to look at making sure that there's more local production of local food within our health diets, and I do feel that that needs to be added to your strategy within that, and I'd like your views on those things. Thank you.
Councillor Hutchins.
I'm thinking about how we get fresh vegetables to people. I know the difficulty that from conversations with those that have run food banks, that the donations tend to be from things like buy one get one free, and someone chucks the baked beans or whatever it is into the basket, and that goes to the food bank. I think that is more difficult with fresh vegetables. It might be possible, perhaps, with discussions with some of the supermarkets who are perhaps less worried about the less cosmetically attractive vegetables, maybe the ones that are getting close to their sell-by date, and we might be able to put something in, or at least discuss with them how we might be able to put something forward there. I will talk through that issue with officers and see if we can come up with some ideas.
Thank you. Council Leader, you wish to make a comment as well?
Thank you, Chair. To give me each time a few seconds that I'm in the public view. Yeah, so I think an interesting point by Councillor Lilly, because I don't know whether he's speaking from an island-wide perspective or a town perspective, but I can assure him that some of the, particularly the rural villages and communities, as part of the community hub work, have been providing a variety of foodstuffs, some of which have been very fresh because I've seen them in their local provision pockets, if you like. So don't judge everything on that. And sometimes people that aren't fully sighted on the rural world don't pick up what's going on. I think that's a valid point. And I think the other one, and I know we've got a member of West White on the scrutiny panel, but they will probably echo the fact that we have worked quite hard within the means that we had to make sure that they had funding through the government grant and loan scheme, because it was important to us, as indeed we have done with others. So the problem, I think, is people have to understand it's not a bottomless pit. And even the money we've spent, and I know Councillor Hutchinson will probably echo me on this one, we're only expecting 75p back of every pound we've spent. So our deficit with government is going to be quite interesting when we come to have that debate with them. And as he indicated at the outset, I'm already having the debate through various quarters. So it's challenging times.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stewart. Colleagues, are there other questions? I see that Councillor Kennett has commented in the chat bar. about that there are local suppliers donating fresh food and vegetables to the hub, such as Arrowton Tomato. And the Director of Neighbourhoods, Colin Rowland, you'd like to make a comment as well?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just very briefly, that the Climate Change Action Plan, which is coming back to the with the neighbourhoods scrutiny, will actually cover food security and sustainable agriculture. So it's actually within the climate change and environment strategy, which feeds into the recovery plan as an element of that.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland. That's a helpful comment. I don't see any other indications for to ask questions. Perhaps that's a reflection of the 30-something pages. I now see Councillor Lilly has risen to that bait. Councillor Lilly. We'll unmute in a moment.
Sorry, particularly the word Brexit is within the document, right? And is mentioned. It is.
Councillor Lilly, you've muted again.
I'm there. You got me?
Yes, we have you now.
The word Brexit is within the document, large and life, and in fact within the performance documents it also comes up as a high risk area. I would like to know what the kind of discussions on mitigation strategies of the fact that we could be heading towards a possible, the winter, economic things and Brexit all at the same time. It's sort of all coming into the junction. It's not long off till that, only a few months. So I'd like to know the strategy or the mitigation in trying to tackle that convergence, really, which would be the worst scenario.
Councillor Hutchinson, you want to pick up Brexit?
Yeah, I know. We tended to have forgotten about that for a while, dealing with the pandemic. But I can say that within the Local Resilience Forum, they have been reviving some of the processes that were put in place some time ago for dealing with Brexit, sort of issues as to how we will get stuff through the ports, particularly in Portsmouth and Southampton. One of the things that none of us know yet is how the change of tariffs, if that's what we end up with on the 1st of January, will affect the volume and type of import and export. So all I can say at this moment is that I do know that the LRF is working on it. Possibly, I think maybe our Chief Exec might have more sighting on this than I have, if he's able to comment.
I believe he wishes to, yes. Chief Executive.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just to support what Stuart has said, we are working very closely with the Local Resilience Forum that has a direct connection back into MHCLG, and as information is being brought forward and updated, then we are responding accordingly. We're all, as a Local Resilience Forum, in very good dialogue with supermarkets and suppliers, in good dialogue with the government about its expectations with effect from 1st of January. And we will collectively respond as those things change and amend. Clearly, as Councillor Lilly has highlighted, trying to do all this in the middle of the COVID pandemic is also a challenge. But to make that easier, we will be trying to encourage people to do various simple things like, have flu jabs, continue to follow the guidance around social distancing, hand washing, face covering, because preventing the transmission of the virus is very, very important. And if we continue to have low transmission rates on the island, that would be really helpful to us and able to turn our attention to dealing with, if you like, the impacts of some of the Brexit decisions. But of course, I think today there was only further meetings today, wasn't there, to negotiate the exit deal. So until we're clearer about the exit deal, we have to be very fleet of foot in terms of arrangements we have in place. And certainly our emergency planners working with colleagues on the mainland are looking at all the possible risks and mitigations that we need to put in place to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And of course, those two great challenges at the moment that work has to be incredibly well integrated, and I think that's what we have just heard. I've noted in the chat bar that Councillor Quirk, who is a member of this committee, has been present all the time, but through the nature of the technology has accidentally or otherwise joined as a member of the public rather than as a member of the committee. So I'm sure behind the scenes some efforts may be able to be made to allow Councillor Quirk to join us formally. Colleagues, there are no other questions, so I'm going to just test a couple of things myself. So I noted that para 16, that the sense check of all key other strategies, an obvious role there for scrutiny committees, not just this committee, but the policy and scrutiny committees to be involved in sense checking that, and indeed continuing to have reports to them that are up to date on the relevant aspects of all of this plan and everything that goes with it. So I wouldn't necessarily move that as a formal recommendation, but I'm sure that Cabinet and directors will be very keen to make sure that there are formal reports going to them, no doubt responding to the perennial question, which is what are we trying to get to the bottom of here. I note now that I have Councillor Lilly who wishes to respond. Is it a question or to pick up a further point? Councillor Lilly.
I just wish to pick up. One is I know the adults, the Health Scrutiny Committee is meeting next Monday, and we'll obviously discuss many of the aspects of the health side, which would include obviously mental health that I would have questions on. So I'm not. I think the point is all the scrutiny committees are going to be discussing aspects of the COVID or COVID recovery plan. So I'm not going to duplicate that. I just wanted to and I know next week the health scrutiny is particularly looking at the voluntary sector as an item and the work of that. But I think it's important to highlight that sector is actually done very well, and actually with support from Isle of Wight Council and others has applied for all the different kind of grants. But we have to take into account that voluntary sector, which is extremely important to our infrastructure on the island, which was proved through the COVID-19, rely very heavily on fundraising. And those fundraising opportunities are completely gone. There's no walk around the Wight. There is none of the the ride slide and all these kinds of things, which raises hundreds of thousands for the voluntary sector yearly, and are not going to be able to do that next year. So actually there's a good message from the voluntary sector. It's surviving, it's using its reserves, is in a good position, but it is extremely vulnerable regarding the fact that it's lost a huge big of its power to raise money, which has been the fundraising this year. And I think that we just need to make sure that is within the discussions. I know this will also come up at the Health Scrutiny Committee.
That I'm sure it is in that thinking, but it's good to have you emphasize that point. We saw a great deal of exceptional work from the voluntary sectors and new people coming in to be part of that voluntary sector as well as the whole island stood up to face the challenges that we had in the last few months. I would also echo my concerns. I think Councillor Lee raised around the nature of the Health and Wellbeing Board being accountable for the wider island recovery plan. Councillor Hutchinson, I believe you said in your opening remarks it will be a sort of joint accountability with Cabinet as well. And obviously the structures of this council will want to to be able to hold people to account. That's not necessarily to criticise, but to hold to account for some incredibly important decisions that are to be made over the coming months. I see you nodding, so I'll take that. Colleagues, as there are no other questions, I take that as a reflection that this is a comprehensive report. Could I suggest that we make a recommendation along the lines that we find the report is comprehensive in its discussion of the principles of continuing to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, that it is clearly taking an evidence base that is appropriate to responding to that pandemic, and is setting out in detail, noting that it sets out in detail an action plan for delivery of this. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean, colleagues, you have to agree with every word within it, but I think this is a comprehensive report that is fit for its purpose. So, can I take it? Can I suggest that that is what we might resolve in roughly those terms? Councillor Lilly, and then Councillor Kennett. Councillor Lilly first. If you unmute yourself first, Councillor Lilly.
I wish to add to that, support what you're putting forward, but I do feel that we need to add that we would like the Health and Wellbeing Board slightly expanded, right, to represent particularly the 3 pillars, recovery pillars. And the other I would recommend is that from a scrutiny point of view, that there should be a report back to corporate scrutiny and not just health scrutiny, because it's much wider than health. It's right across all the pillars of recovery are right across. So I do think the Health and Wellbeing Board should report back to corporate scrutiny, or scrutiny has the opportunity to scrutinise the board.
Thank you for that. In a sense, I took from Councillor Hutchinson's view that there would be reporting through to Cabinet. They would receive written reports that, by nature of our ongoing business, we would be scrutinising, or the Corporate Scrutiny Committee would be scrutinising any case. Councillor Hutchinson, are you able to confirm that?
That's correct, Chairman. Obviously, reports will come to Cabinet, and that means automatically they will be considered by scrutiny, and you will have all of those details. And it may well be that as the recovery progresses and hopefully the health issues become less of a problem, perhaps next year when we have a vaccine that is being promised, then other things like the economic recovery will take precedence, and it may well be at that point we would want to report in a different way to the startup.
Indeed. So, Councillor Kennett, and then perhaps we might take a vote on this.
This is just a very quick comment, Chairman. I was just thinking, listening to you talk, this is out of adversity. We've talked about how we have one public estate on the island, and unfortunately it looks like COVID is the thing that's done that for us. So I really appreciate the fact that town and parish councils and community councils and volunteers are going to be brought in to work alongside of the Cabinet on this. So I just find that really encouraging. Thank you.
Councillor Kennett, in the chat bar, the leader of the council has confirmed the reporting arrangements of health and wellbeing, but I think I am satisfied. I think the Vice Chair is as well, that by taking reports to Cabinet, that we will be able to, the Corporate Scrutiny Committee will be able to scrutinise. Of course, there is a general power for us to scrutinise within the statute, so, but I'm sure we wouldn't need to exercise that. I'm sure Cabinet will be very keen to take reports and have us scrutinise those. So I put a resolution which I think, hoping that Mr. Thistlewood, the officer, has captured as augmented by Councillor Lilly's suggestion. Mr. Thistlewood, are you able to read that out for us?
I'll do my best, Chairman. that you find the report comprehensive and you agree with the principles contained with it as the appropriate response to the COVID pandemic, and it has been evidence-based where appropriate, and you sets out the detailed action plan.
So I hope everybody caught that. There was a little bit of echo on coming through. It's the nature of still learning about how this technology can be used. So I have moved that from the chair. Member, shall I take a roll call vote? I think I will. Is it seconded first? So Councillor Lilly seconding just before Councillor Andre. I will take a roll call vote on this. So how do we do this? Do I just lead through the names? Yeah. Okay. So my own vote as chair is 4. Councillor Andre.
4, Chair.
Church.
4.
Councillor Lilly.
4.
Councillor Quirk, if he is present now. He may not yet be. We may not be solved on that. And Councillor Hobart.
Yeah, 4.
Thank you. That's all of those. Oh, Councillor Kennett. I am so sorry, Councillor Kennett. Of course. I do apologise for that. I was reading off the wrong list. So that is passed, and I hope that sends a message of how we see that paper. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily mean we agree with every dotted I and crossed T within it, but broadly, it is a comprehensive paper that is addressing properly things as we would expect. There's obviously an incredible amount of work has been done by officers and by members, including cabinet members, of course, throughout the last few months. Colleagues, it is coming up to 6 o'clock. Is there any colleague who wishes us now to have a comfort break before I move us on to item 5? I don't see any indications of that, so I'll move on, but I will check with you all again in a little while. So item 5 is the quarterly performance and finance reports under 4 bullet points, and that includes 2 reports that are responses to our scrutiny many months ago, it feels now, on the Highways PFI contract, and again off from the Director of Neighbourhoods at that time to also report on the performance on the waste contract. My proposal is to take B, C, D first and then return to A, the general report to Cabinet, because of the precedence that in the sense that the proactive business of the council, which is that of this committee, which is that we would take those 2 contracts first. So the first item I'm intending to take is the Highways PFI contract paper, which is paper B. Is there any officer or cabinet member, I should say cabinet member or officer, who wishes to add anything to this report? Otherwise, I'll move to questions from colleagues.
Chairman, obviously I'm here. I would just like to introduce it, if I may, and introduce the officers we have here. If you're happy with that, I'll crack on.
I'm very happy with that. Please do.
Members, I'm pleased to present to you the service performance of the Isle of Wight Island Roads contract over the period December until June 20. Due to the COVID disruption, this period covers the performance of the contract for the final quarter of 1920 and the first quarter of 2021. The following officers and representatives of Island Roads are present in the meeting, and we're happy to answer any questions or take away any of your requests. There's our Director of Neighbourhoods, Mr. Colin Rowlands, and from Island Roads, Mr. Phil Horton and Mr. Rob Gillespie. I'm sure you're familiar with them. They've attended scrutiny previously. I think the report is self-explanatory. I would ask Mr. Rowland to run through a summary of some of the items by way of an introduction. As you can see from the report, the contract has been fulfilled and indeed exceeded the condition indices scores across all relevant areas. This is also borne out by a recent independent report published by the Island Echo, but there is a reference behind that stating that the island roads are now amongst the best in the country and most improved. As this is the first time we have provided the performance performance information to this committee in this format, I would welcome suggestions from the committee of any changes or additions they would consider pertinent, which will be considered for the next round of reporting. However, before I finish, I have two brief items which I'd like to draw to the committee's attention. Firstly, I'm pleased to introduce the Council's new Strategic Manager for Highways and Transport, Jane Dando. I think Jane's here.
Yes, Chairman. Yes, Councillor, I am here. I'm in the boardroom at Island Roads Depot, if you can hear me. And I would just like to say hello. I've been here 7 weeks now, and I'm looking forward to the challenge. I'm sure I'll get to know you all better. I've got a lot to learn, but I'm very eager and enthused to do so.
Thank you. You're welcome to the authority.
Yeah, I mean, highways matters touch us all in one way or another, and you know, people do get quite emotive about issues. We will all get on well with Jane in the coming months and hopefully years to come. Secondly, I'd like to extend my thanks to the managers and staff of Island Roads and our own council staff for the efforts they have made working in partnership over this difficult period. Island Roads have continued to effectively deliver as much of the contract as possible to protect and enhance the highway asset, but to also maintain safety for road users during this period. I'd like now to hand over to Mr. Rowlands, if I may. Thank you. Who will take you through the report. Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to check my microphone initially. Yes, I'm on. Right, but I think the report itself is quite self-explanatory, but what I wanted to do is just to cover some of the definitions, just a little bit of more clarity in terms of some of the things that we will go through in terms of the report. As members are aware, the core investment programme, which is covered in the definition, which is the time for the key investment within the contract, that lasts for 7 years. We're coming towards the close of that core investment period at this stage. As per the briefing of committee in February, the contract's measured, as Councillor Ward alluded to, using industry standard condition indices, which are measured across 6 district areas across the council. Members will recall the details of the geographical districts were provided in a map at the previous committee meeting. The condition indices in the tables in the report, they cover the following areas. So there's carriageway condition, and just a bit of clarity there that it's all the categories of road, 1 being an A road, our most important roads, and 4A being the minor roads within the various areas of the island. The average condition score for the category 1 roads is 15.5, and for the minor roads and all other roads, i.e. the roads from level 2, category 2 to 4A, the average condition is 15. As you can see by the tables there, all of the conditions for each of the areas and each of the roads, which we covered earlier, are still in excess of the average condition expected as part of the contract. The other condition indices cover footways. The one comment I'd make there is that we have made a concession to white fibre on the footways. So we've actually, the footway condition has been actually extended in terms of meeting milestone 14 as a result of us allowing white fibre to come into the come on the island and do the works on the footways and then be reinstated to the condition that they're required. So if the footway condition is slightly behind the other conditions because of that white fibre concession that we've agreed as a partner. Car park conditions and structures and bridges are the other ones that are within the performance measures that are actually highlighted. As can be seen from the condition tables, and as Councillor Ward alluded to before, the contract has been fulfilled and indeed it's exceeded in terms of how it's measured by the conditions indices across the districts. The committee will also recall how that the indices represent an average score for each district area, and the contract doesn't allow for a full improvement of all the island's roads and associated assets, because it does operate and it's measured on those condition indices. It's not measured on the way on bringing all the roads on the island up to a certain standard. And that was something we talked about at length at the February meeting. I wanted to talk about as well about post CIP works, as in post core investment period, in that members should note that although the core investment period ends at that 7-year period, it's not the end of the investment in improving our roads over the course of the contract. The contractor is required to ensure that the condition indices, as we mentioned before, are maintained. So that this means that investment will continue, and it's required to maintain the highways assets over the whole period of the contract, the remaining 18 years. So that there isn't a cliff edge at the end of the core investment period. There will be continued investment over that period to maintain the asset, because the asset is seen effectively, and again we went through this in the February meeting, as an investment by the Isle of Wight Council, by the Department for Transport, and also it's a loan that we've actually facility that we've actually got from funders. So the three elements there have got an interest in those assets being maintained to that standard for the whole 18 years of the contract. Investment continues. Work has commenced on the 2021 programme, albeit there was some delay because of COVID on that programme for carriageways and footways. As reported in February, the programme of works post CIP has been included within the annual programme, which was submitted to us as an authority in January 2020 and has been updated in June. This will be completed as part of the carriageway and footway programme for 2021. So effectively what we've got a carriageway and footway programme that is enhanced by a core investment that's enhanced by a post investment programme that is going on beyond the core investment period. A list of other measures is detailed in the report, and this includes, for example, the fact that anti-skid programme has been completed, all the street light works were completed in milestone 6, CCTV cameras were completed at milestone 7, illuminated signs. So just to give you what I think what's quite useful about the report on performance is that it covers the whole aspects of the PFI contract, and it's not just about road condition or footways or pathways. It's about all the assets that are on a highway network. So signage, safety fencing, structures, the whole aspects of it are covered by the contract and are covered by that investment that was made around about £800 million over the period of the contract to actually bring up the roads to a good standard. So the report also includes, finally, I'm almost finished, members, you'll be glad to hear, includes a table of a list of other assets upgraded as part of the contract, and other operational matters are included within the contract, within the performance, which includes health and safety, environmental performance, which we hold in high regard because we have a responsibility as a local authority for highway safety of the workforce and on the highways itself, and that's passed through to our contractor as well, and they hold that quite seriously as well. Communications and complaints, and finally what we've got in there is the key performance indicators that we've drawn out that measure that contract performance. Now again, what we'd like to do is, if there are any other measurements or are there any other things that members feel we ought to be looking at, we can take that away and consider that when we come back for the next performance report, because we recognise, as Councillor Ward said, it's the first time that we presented it in this form before. It's the first time that you've been looking at this performance in this nature. So what I'll do is together with Andrew, Island Roads representatives, are happy to take any questions now through the chairman on the report. Thank you, Mr.
Rowland. Two comprehensive, I hope members feel comprehensive introductions there. Councillor Stewart, you said you had a comment on this before I would open it up to my colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. As always, you're very comprehensive in your management of this meeting. Two comments, really. I want to just briefly touch, and I will be brief. We have what I would describe as robust, fair and positive relationship with the Island Roads team. And I know on the call at the moment we have some senior players from it. But we don't get to be the most improved roads in the country by chance. We get that because we are managing this contract robustly. We have a fair relationship, and actually we're being positive because we believe this is a fantastic opportunity. And my evidence of that as you know, Chair, we've got the LeBlanc event in the 25th of September. We've got the Tour of Britain team on the 2022, and we have the Diamond Races opportunity as well. And the feedback I'm getting from these people, and some of these people travel roads across the country, they cannot believe how good our roads are. And if you're a pedal cyclist, to be able to ride on a road that is good is actually a health and well-being issue. And that's why I think these national races, and anybody who's been out in the last few weeks has seen pedal cyclists all over. I call them pedal cyclists. I don't mean that to be rude to anybody. It's just I'm not an expert, but would agree that we are attracting economically what we need because of this. So it has a much wider positive outcome. That's all I wanted to highlight. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you for that. I think it's now time for the members of the committee. So Councillor Andre.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you to Mr. Rowland. I would like to just further clarify something, just pick him up just slightly on something that he said. He said all the roads are not required to be brought up to a set standard. That's correct, that all the roads across the island are not required to be done, but all of the roads on the island are required to be a set standard. So I think there's a slight clarification there, whereas the actual standard that was set, some of the roads already met that standard. So a bit of clarification there. Thank you very much for this report. One of the comments that I would like to make is on page B4. We are presented with an update for the core investment programme, but there I can't see that we're given some figures, but we're not given comparatives to the milestone level set within the contract. So what I would like to see is the update is this is where we are now in terms of the core investment programme, and how does this measure up with the targets that were actually set within the contract? And I think I can see Councillor Ward wanting to come in.
Councillor Ward, do you want to take that first, or Mr. Rowland? You are muted, Councillor Ward, if you wish to speak.
Okay. I'm not quite sure what Councillor Andre is referring to, but when you look at the like across the districts and the car parks, things like that, are these the figures you're referring to? Because the standard is below. Let's just the monitoring link. No,
so, Councillor Ward, what you mean? Councillor Andre clarifies for you, yeah. And then we'll go from there.
Okay.
Yes, I want to really focus on, it's on page B4 of the report, the core investment programme update. It says, for example, how many kilometres of carriageway have been completed. Yeah. What it doesn't tell us is the kilometres of carriageway that were agreed to be completed within the core investment period. So what I want to know, because obviously milestone 14 has not yet been certified, so I want to be able to see, have we actually fulfilled all the criteria for milestone 14? And I can't see that from this report.
Okay, well, I can't answer that. Maybe our Island Roads officers can.
So is there an officer one way or another who can answer that question, please?
Can I just come in briefly, Mr. Chairman? I think we can answer that question in terms of, again, going back to the condition indices, in that it's not that the mile or the kilometres of carriageway is not the way that the contract is measured. It's measured on the condition indices. So it's measured on the average condition of the roads brought up to standard by a certain period. I can bring in our Island Roads colleagues to confirm that, because I'm sure and I know that they've been involved with the contract from the start.
Yes, Colin, it's Phil Horton here from Island Roads. I can confirm that's correct. Councillor Andre, just picking up on your point in terms of overall condition. There are two key measures in the contract. For each individual road, there is a minimum condition criteria, which in highway terms is relatively low. And the measurement in terms of the volume of work completed is not linked to volume, it is linked to the average condition. Where you see the tables where you have the 15, the 15 and a half, or the 12 and a half, depending on whether you're looking at carriageways or footways. So your point was correct in the sense that each individual road is not allowed to deteriorate below a minimum condition. However, in terms of volume of activity done, that is driven entirely by the average condition of the highway network, which is set out in those tables. It's not driven by a volume or a length of carriageway resurfacing, for example.
If I could come in on that. However, the actual contract is measured, if we are to believe the statement at the bottom of B3, which is that no monitoring length may be less than, and it specifies one thing for hierarchy 1 and hierarchies 2 to 4A. However it's measured, are you able to say that there is no road in either of those hierarchies that at present time is below that measurement? My understanding of that statement is that any individual monitoring length cannot be below those measures. Averages are, as we know, easily gained, and if that 500 and something kilometres of carriageway completed is still a percentage of a number of carriageways still to be completed, then I think Councillor Andre's point is very well made, that it should be possible to state that there is still remain 50, 60, 80, whatever kilometres of carriageway. Maybe it's a conversion from monitoring length to kilometre, but I cannot see why that question can't be answered in those terms. Would you like to comment?
I'll take this one. It's Rob Gillespie at Island Roads. Unfortunately, I think the wording below the tables is slightly misleading. The minimum scores, as Councillor Andre pointed out and Phil has just spoken about, the minimum scores for a carriageway is 6, and the average is 15.5 or 15, depending on the hierarchy of road. Similarly, on footways, it is 8 minimum, and 12.5 average. So yes, Councillor Garrett, you're right that averages are averages. And so many of those roads and footways will be over those average targets, many of them, and some will be below, but none will be below the minimum scores.
Thank you for that. I think that reaches my point, that we can still have some very poor carriageways and highways on our roads. Anyway, I'll bring Councillor Andre back in. She had the floor on questions.
Thank you. Just to follow up, just for some clarity, I'm referring to the method statement, and it clearly stated in my understanding in the method statement, it worked on percentages. There seems to be a bit of a changing narrative here, because we were originally given percentages of roads, which was 93%, that were to be brought, that actually needed work to be brought up to the agreed standard within the core investment period, which has now ended.
Is that for Island Roads again to respond, or Mr. Rowland?
I think it's more for, well, I think
I'm waiting for one or the other to volunteer.
I'm happy for anyone to respond.
Sorry, Chair, it's Rob Gillespie again. I'm happy to jump in. Method statements are obviously the descriptive documents of the plan for the contract. The method statements were written for this project over the years 2011, 2012 probably, and then formed part of the submission for that contract. And if you like, at that time, the bidding contractors for this project had to make their assessment of the condition of the network and also the condition by which it would deteriorate over a period of time just through normal wear and tear or volumes of traffic or freeze-thaw from winter. So the method statement annexes, which included certain amounts of attention to the roads and the footways, would have had a predicted amount of work. And with those predicted amount of work would be the condition by which the roads would improve to meet the plan of meeting the average requirements of condition by the end of the core investment period. So not every road has deteriorated at the speed that was considered back in 2011 or 2012, because roads behave differently, winter seasons behave differently, and the action of traffic on the roads happens differently as well. And therefore you're always seeking to predict how that deterioration will occur, and it will never be totally accurate. So as Mr. Rowland said earlier, there's a significant amount of work continuing after the core investment period. And if you like, maybe some of the roads that have not fallen within the core investment period to be completed have actually lasted longer before they've reached a condition that requires treatment or is economically best to treat until later in this programme, and therefore you will probably see those being picked up over the next few years. Again, the requirement of the contract is to maintain that average now has been achieved, and to maintain that through the remainder of the contract.
Councillor Andre, do you have any more? Or otherwise?
Yes, I would just like to point out that the method statements are actually a legal part of the contract. And well, I have to say, I'm not really happy with that answer, to be honest, because it seems that, and looking at other parts of the report, there have been revisions to the KPIs. So, yes, I'm as I say, I'm not really happy with that answer.
So, bear with me, colleagues. I can see Councillor Quirker is still having some problems with connections, as in the chat bar. Okay, I've got Councillor Lilly first, but then I will pick up Councillor Quirk's question on my behalf. Councillor Lilly.
You have to bear with me. I'm probably a bear of little brain, but if you look at sort of on B4, it clearly says 531.48k of carriageway completed as of 30th of June 2020. It also says 271.11 km of footway completed as of 30th of June 2020. And obviously it was quite clear that the contract finished in March, right? Within that, can you tell me the KM that needs to still be completed for the carriageway and footways? Because that's really what I want to know. I know at least the 3 of those KMs are in my ward, which is in Ryde East, that I'm still waiting to see being completed. And they're major roads that go on to the bay from Ryde, so they're actually quite important. So I'd just like to know very clearly, very simply, how many KM of carriageway and how many KM of footway still needs to be completed that wasn't completed in the original contract time.
I'll happily pick that one up if that would help. The answer to your question is that the measure is not based on the amount of carriageway completed. So in terms of achieving the contract requirement, it is based on an average, and those are the kilometres that have been completed. There is no necessary additional amount of carriageways that is required to meet the contract standard. Having said that, the contract standard is to maintain that average for the next 18 years. And the principle is therefore that additional work will continue to be required as the carriageways that have not been treated continue to deteriorate. They will require interventions and they will require renewal activity to ensure that that average is maintained, or indeed, as we said earlier, if certain roads are likely to fall beneath the minimum standard, they will also require treatment. So to answer your question directly, there isn't an additional amount of kilometres required to meet the contract standard at this moment in time, but there will be over time as deterioration continues. And I suppose the key point I would make is that that risk in its entirety is transferred to us. We are responsible for average condition, and will be required to ensure that average is maintained.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lilly, do you want to come back?
I thank you for your answer, but I don't understand it, because I have 3 major roads in my ward: High Park Road, Great Preston Road and Marlborough Road. I am still waiting for details of when are they going to be resurfaced. They are major roads in Ryde. Extremely the one hasn't actually been done since the 1950s. And it continually has potholes in it and whatever. I'm sorry of being a bear of a little brain here, but like most residents, we look and see what we have got. There might be wonderful roads in the rest of the island, but as a Ryde councillor, I just get continually of residents of saying, when are roads going to be done?
The board has indicated they can respond. I think Councillor Lilly's ward example is appropriate, as indeed it affects other wards as well. I think there's an issue with highlighting a ward level matter there. Just responding to a comment there in the chat bar from Leader.
Can I come back on that? I can understand Councillor Stewart's view on this, but actually those roads are.
Councillor Lilly, can I just take Councillor Ward's response first?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think we're falling into the trap again of thinking all the island roads were going to be resurfaced. That was never the case. Never the case. Okay, it was in the very early PFI negotiations that would be the case. When the government changed, they recalled all the relevant PFIs that were out there, re-examined all of them, only let about 3 through. One of ours was one of those select 3. However, they took 100 million out of the contract, at least something like that, took 100 million out of the contract, which changed the whole dynamic, which meant that all we could do was repair what needed to be repaired when it needed to be repaired. Don't nod your head, Debbie, that's the case. Okay, that was what the contract ended up as. So when people say, when are you going to do my road? Unfortunately, your road may not need doing. Now, I know the roads you're talking about, Councillor Lilly, and, you know, offhand, I would say they're not wonderful, but they are serviceable. And I think our island roads contractors will say the same thing. May I refer that to you, Mr. Gillespie?
Can I ask island roads, in a more general point, I think, setting aside that Councillor Lilly has cited some examples in his ward, the way averages, of course, can be gained is that we can continually maintain a few which are high enough standard to always keep the average above a certain target, but that could lead to other roads deteriorating. So I think what we need is assurance that the contract actually allows for those really deteriorating roads still must be done. Not that they might be done if there's no other work to be done, but they must be done as a means of maintaining that average, rather than relying on roads that are above the average, which could be significantly above, which actually just keep that going up, keep that average above a target score. So can we have that assurance that roads that really are deteriorating genuinely will be done? And yes, I'll ask that of island roads. I think
I can give you a direct answer. The answer to your question is that the roads that will be identified for intervention will be identified on the basis of 2 things. Either it will be to achieve a particular condition, either in terms of the average or because they are going to fail the minimum condition. So they'll be based on, if you like, a score. or they will be based on a need to intervene because of the whole life cost implications. So the old adage of investing, decision time saves 9, investing up front because it will be a cost-effective way rather than doing something later. I'm not able to give you an assurance that we will do all of the roads and we'll make an intervention as you ask for. I am able to give you the reassurance that we are required and will continue to make sure that we maintain roads above the minimum average, and we will continue to maintain the average requirement for all of those hierarchies of road. It's probably not my place to comment on the genesis and the standards within the contract, but I can tell you very clearly that they are based on objective industry measures using fully qualified to national standard surveying contractors. Therefore, all the measures that we're required to adhere to are based on a thoroughly rigorous national standard. It's not my place to comment on the standards for intervention set within the contract, but I can certainly give you the reassurance that we will always intervene to ensure that none of the roads deteriorates beyond the minimum standard required.
Thank you. Councillor Lilly, you wish to come back in, and then I will take this question from Councillor Quirk. And then I will have Councillor Churchman. Councillor Lilly? It's muted.
I think that there are a certain key road in a number of our, conurbations, which are important flow roads, which have increasing number of lorries and traffic on them. And you've got to link that, you cannot separate that from future developments where you, the east of Ryde compared to also areas in Newport and possibly in the Sandown area will have building and works for a number of years and a huge increase in potential traffic. So Island Roads must be looking at the increased traffic on those roads and the fact that are those roads strong enough to take that traffic. So I really do question that some of these key roads are actually taking a real battering, and will need there needs to be some prediction of resurfacing or rebuilding them. I really do feel that there are certain parts of the island where there are roads particularly are increasing urban areas with development and increasing sort of traffic that is putting our roads in real difficulty.
Councillor Island Roads to respond to that point, and then I will take this one from Councillor Quirk. And then any other questions, but I'm aware that we could spend a lot of time on this, and I think that there needs to be a recommendation as to how this committee can further explore this, or through the Policy and Scrutiny Committee as well. But Island Roads, could you respond to that point of Councillor Lilly's, and then I'll put Councillor Quirk's question.
Well, I'll try to. We do take into consideration the use of the roads, and we do take part in many of your committees and your strategy groups that look towards the future transport planning of the island, and we have to take that into consideration because, of course, whatever happens to the roads, whatever development causes the road use to change by, or any of the assets used to change by, affects our ability to deliver the quality that you require. Therefore, there are mechanisms within the contract that provide the ability to change the requirements if the type of use is going to change significantly by development. Otherwise, yes, we are planning our strategies looking forward to make sure that the roads will do what they are required to do. I would say that if you're about to do a development, most local authorities would be planning for the future use of the road, not to develop the road in order to facilitate the construction of that new development, but would be planning for the future use of the road at the end of the development to carry the traffic that it is required for that development itself. So it is in the plan, it is in consideration, and we do sit on your other committees which look at the future strategy of transport around the island. and also through development control teams and working with your planning teams as well.
Thank you for that. Mr. Metcalfe, you wanted to make a quick comment, and then
Thank you, Chairman. Really, very briefly, because I know you want to move on. I think I'll just make two comments, really. Your observation about gaming the averages, I think, is absolutely true, if that were open-ended in terms of the contract. However, that's why the contract has monitoring lengths, so that you can only look at the average over a certain length of road. And that's perhaps something we may want to do a little bit more work to explain to members of the committee. I think the second one would be an invitation, I think, to Councillor Andre, because clearly she has some reference documents that she's referring back to, and I think it would be helpful if we tried to do a check back with Councillor Andre's reference documents to where we are now, just to kind of help that transition from what that document says to the current position. And very, very happy to offer that level of help if that would be of assistance. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Metcalfe. The question that Councillor Quirk, I shall read from the chat bar for those who aren't privy to this. It seems to me that island roads are in some areas being delayed by white fibre being behind schedule in their cable laying. Is it possible to do anything to expedite work on roads in poor condition? I'm not quite sure. I'm not further delayed by this. I think there's a word missing in that. Can you, more broadly then, a comment on how Island Roads engages with white fibre and indeed other companies that have an impact on our roads, the engagement and how you make sure you expedite things?
Do you want me to come in first, and then I'll pass over to Island Roads?
Yes.
Basically, we Island Roads are working very closely with white fibre, that working to the accepted streetworks code, and Island Roads have actually put in quite a significant amount of resource, because we recognise that white fibre is a huge investment in the island, and we want to make sure that as many people as possible have access to full broadband. So we're balancing that requirement to do that on the island against making sure that we protect the asset, which is what we've been talking about here, particularly in terms of footways, but also in terms of road as well. I'll just bring in Rob, Mr. Gillespie, if he wants to add to any of that.
Yes.
Well, I have to thank you for that, Mr. Rowland. The powers that we have and the council have are as Mr. Rowland just said, are around the Traffic Management Act and the Streetworks Act, which are legislation which protects the authority, and therefore, because we have responsibility for the quality of the roads and the footways, they give us a level of protection. However, the utilities, the regulated utilities across the nation operate on statutory instruments which they have from central government themselves. And therefore we have less regulatory powers because they report into Ofcom in the case of fibre and Ofgen for electricity and things like that. As Mr. Rowland has just said, we exercise the duties of the authority for streetworks enforcement, and also now through the permitting scheme, the Traffic Management Act, to make sure that white fibre in this case are doing what they need to do to meet the requirements of those legislations. And I would say that they are a little bit behind in some places, but we are working extremely closely, as is the council officers, to help white fibre get back on track, deliver that very important asset to the communities of the island, to have the digital upgrade. But also, as we've said, we need to protect the road asset, the footway asset going forward as well, because it is all part of one of the biggest assets that the council has, not just for the remaining 18 years of this PFI project, but for the long-term future.
Thank you for that. Councillor Churchman.
Sorry, Chair. I thought you were going to move on. Just very quickly, I chaired Overview and Scrutiny in 2013 when the contract was signed, and I do remember the government knocking 100 million off the original figure, which meant that our highways chap at the time, of course, had to rewrite an awful lot of the contract. Incidentally, when are you going to do Luckham Road? However, I think, don't laugh, Ian. I think we have to take an overall view. Without a doubt, we have some of the best roads in the country. And I'm so pleased that in 2013, I voted for this contract. Lots of councillors didn't. And there is no doubt our thanks should go to the Highways people and to the PFI, because when you go across to the mainland, get off a motorway, and my goodness, how the other half live. However, we are where we are. And one thing I would like to know is, is it possible, feasible, to actually have a list of the roads that have been upgraded, I'll use that word, as opposed to those roads at the moment which have not been touched. As we've said, it is a question of the condition of the road as to whether it is upgraded at this point in time, but I still would like to know what is left to do. To me, like you, Debbie, I find that a simplistic approach, but this is what my constituents want to know. What's left to do, please? Thank you.
So, Mr. Rowland, is that possible through the contract?
Yeah, can I bring in Mr. Gillespie again? I think yes. it comes again to that overall condition and having to protect the asset and having to invest in that asset, because that's what the funding was provided for. So I'll just pass you over to Mr. Gillespie for if he wants to make a comment on that.
I'll pick that if I may, Chairman. It's Phil Horton. The simple answer to your question is probably explained by the process we have to do on an annual basis. As you know, we measure the condition of all the roads on an annual basis, and as a result of that, we then produce an annual programme, and that programme defines the roads that are going to be done each year. The carriageways and footways similarly will deteriorate during that period, and then another annual survey is done. So yes, it is certainly possible to let you know and to have details of that annual programme. The only caveat I would put on that, particularly this year, is that is subject to change. Obviously this year that's been subject to significant change because of coronavirus, but also in terms of the nature of the work we do. A lot of what we do is very weather susceptible. So what we tend to find is that we are able to prioritise schemes. What we try and do is to prioritise maintaining the majority of the programme if we have to make a change. So for example, rather than if there was a delay as a result of heavy rain for a period, what we would avoid doing would be to delay the whole programme by a period of time. What we would do is take a particular scheme out of that programme and then come back and do it at a later stage to try and maintain the rest of the programme. But on an annual basis, it is very much possible to share what that annual programme is, because that's widely publicised and we produced that on our website. I was going to make another point, going back to the earlier comment on white fibre, which is difficult as it is. It is an area where we do need to be patient, in the sense that because of the time taken for white fibre to do their work, it doesn't make sense for us to come in and do any upgrade works sooner. And it's important for the long-term life of the asset that the quality of the work white fibre do is right, so the time is taken to get that right, and then we can come in afterwards and do the renewal activity that's required. So whilst we have been asked to delay works, we do understand why that is, and it is worthwhile for the long-term life of the asset to be patient, to make sure that the quality of works is done correctly.
Thank you for that. This item has taken significantly longer than the committee, when it met informally last week, just to plan its business, felt it might make. And I think that's a reflection of obviously us as ward councillors, individual frustrations may be coming through there, but also naturally we're reflecting the concerns of the residents of our wards who do not have an interest in the nitty-gritty of the contract line by line, but just want to see roads and footways and other infrastructure at a certain standard. So I think whether we might like what we get from it, there's possibility for a recommendation from this committee or a resolution from this committee that we receive back at a future meeting a report on the approach taken to assessing these average measurements that are used within the performance report. Colleagues, I hope I'm interpreting what I feel I'm getting from you. And second, possibly not for a resolution as such, but perhaps there is work for officers, particularly because they are the main interface for councillors with Island Roads, to help us as individual ward councillors expedite work on roads and footways, and or at least understand why that work is not going ahead, because we see something that is not to a standard that we see elsewhere, however good it may be, and we respond, of course, to the pressures that residents would naturally want to put on that. So I think it would be helpful to that. So colleagues, certainly, I shall put that we receive a further report, and obviously that can be fleshed out by the committee. Certainly after the annual general meeting, it will be in new hands as to how exactly that comes forward. But is there any colleague wish to add to a resolution? Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just suggest that included within that report is the offer from the Chief Executive to have certain documents such as the method statements included within that. Thank you.
Certainly. Any other colleague? Otherwise, are you happy that I put that to you appropriately, or do you need it read out again by an officer? Otherwise, is it seconded? Yeah, a raising of hands generally there. I'll take a roll call vote because I'm sure people will want to know where we stand on this as a corporate scrutiny. Let me find the right list to work from. In fact, I'll work from my screen. So my vote is 4 as chairman, and then Councillor Lilly.
4.
Councillor Andre.
4.
Councillor Kennett.
4.
Councillor Hobart.
4.
Councillor Churchman.
4.
I know that Councillor Quirk is kind of present, but of course he's not properly present, so I won't be able to take a vote. Have I missed anybody this time? No, I have got everybody. So I think the strength of feeling is expressed there. I'm sure we can work between meetings to work out how to make sure the kind of information that we need to have. We certainly do, as a committee, welcome the report that was put to us and the responsiveness of both our own council officers and Island Roads to doing that. But as you can tell, there is still a lot more work to be done to make sure that we understand everything, and we can also get onto a page which actually is about making sure that residents are satisfied that their footways, their highways, and all other infrastructure is at the level that they would find at least adequate for their needs. Although of course we do want more. So colleagues, it's 6:45. I think we are likely to run for a little while yet. I hope we will finish before the 3-hour maximum, but I think we'll take a comfort break at this point for 10 minutes, if that is okay with you. There are nods across the screen, so those who are managing the meeting, if we take this offline for a 10-minute comfort break, we'll be back at 5 minutes to 7. I note that we're still live at the moment, but I'm sure colleagues will take us unlive. Just less than 2 minutes to go. So who have I got? I've got Councillor Andre's returns. Yeah. Colleagues, I'm about to bring us back up to live, subject to there being a quorum hearing before me. I've got myself, Councillor Andre, Councillor Churchman. I've only got those three visible. Are other members of the committee present?
I am.
Councillor Kennett.
Councillor Hobart, I'm here.
Excellent. So we do have a quorum.
I'm here as well.
Excellent. So that is all fine. So if we can go live again, please. So that card will disappear from our view.
Councillor Churchman, I'm here.
Excellent.
Councillor Chapman, I'm here too.
Okay. I'm fine. I've got all the committee members seem to be present, so that's great. So the rest of you don't have to chime in. So I believe the meeting is now live again, but we're still broadcasting a statement that we're adjourned. So I'll just wait for a moment for colleagues to adjust that. Thank you, colleagues, and that brings us back properly live, and we move now on to the next item on the agenda. I will remind colleagues that it is now 5 to 7. There is obviously some important business remaining to be done, but also I know that it can be quite fatiguing to go on for nearly 3 hours. So do keep questions brief, comments brief if you can, and officers and cabinet members do also take that hint as well and keep things succinct. And I will do my best as chair. So the next item is to consider the performance report in respect of the waste contract. Colleagues, because I'm aware of the time, unless there's absolutely something pressing for officers to introduce, can we take it that the report is introduced and move to questions, unless report authors think there is something that they absolutely have to cover, or Councillor Hastings, I think you are responsible for some of this, you may want to cover, but otherwise I'll move straight to questions.
Well, it's up to you, Chairman. Good evening, Chairman and committee members. I do have a few words by way of introduction.
If you work those into your response, Councillor Hastings, if you can work them into your responses, it may be the best way, because I'm aware of the time and I'm sure committee members will.
Okay, that's fair enough. We also have Mr. Colin Rowland still with us, as you are aware, and we have Natasha Dix with us, Strategic Manager for Waste and Environment.
Great to have both of them here on this item, a first for this to be presented to our committee. Councillor Churchman, you have already indicated you have a question, I believe.
Yes, previous to the current waste contract, we had a system whereby bottles and papers were put into a box and left at the side of the normal bin collection. And the normal bin collection in those days took everything. We did not have a sort of recyclable and non-recyclable. Why do we throw all the newspapers, etc., into the same collection as the cans, the bottles, and everything else? Is it because waste paper does not have such a value now as it did, say, 10 years ago? Because, as I said, I thought that original collection of one box for bottles and papers and the other big bin collection seemed to work very well, and they were divided into the carts as far as I remember. Thank you.
We will take that.
Chairman, I'm sure Natasha would be chomping at the bit to answer this one.
Ms. Dix.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Chair. In response to that query, previously we had a very different system in place than we have now, and different facilities that we took things to. The current collection rounds do not, on the main, mix paper with any of the other materials. The paper and card is separately collected. The 7 recycling trucks that we have a split back that have a 30% compartment for paper and card and a 70% compartment for the other mixed recycling, being the glass, metal and plastics. However, that said, on our rural round, which pick up properties or in isolated locations, around 500 properties, we only have one vehicle space at the back of that vehicle. So on those small number of properties, the paper and the glass and metal and card are co-collected. They then go into our brand new recycling facility where they are re-separated and go to separate recycling destinations.
Thank you for that answer.
I hope that answers for you.
Councillor Churchman.
Yes, if I can come back, I live in a private road and therefore we have the small van. So that does explain it, Natasha. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Colleagues, other questions on this paper? Councillor Lilly.
I'd just like to ask one sort of generic question, Councillor Hastings and your team. What areas do you feel that need improvement? You've got some good results. You've obviously had to work right through COVID. I really wish to thank all your staff for doing that. It wasn't easy. Of that and all the the workers at Amy, etc. But what if you look at this report as the cabinet member and Natasha Dix and Colin, what areas are you wanting to improve?
Thank you, Councillor Lilly, for that. And yes, I agree with you how well we've done and how well the staff have done. The operatives particularly, and I think I've said this before in tweets and what have you, not all heroes wear bright red capes. Sometimes they just turn up every time they need to collect your waste and do so. So that's good. What areas to improve? As cabinet member, I would say all areas. Yes, we've done exceedingly well, but we are always looking to improve. Until we are #1, top of the list, we don't stop improving. But beyond that, I'm going to let Natasha come back in because I'm sure she'll have some specifics she'll want to talk about.
Thank you, Councillor Hastings. We do, yes, have an improvement plan. We have an annual improvement plan that we work to every year. This year we've just received, as you've probably seen in some of the social media posts we've had out, our 5-year composition study that's looked at the composition of what individuals are putting in their waste bins across the island, and that has really highlighted to us some areas that we do need to improve across the island as a community to enhance the way that we recycle, but also enhance the safety of our staff. For example, we really need to look at making sure that we don't have batteries and small electronic goods with things like lithium-ion battery and them going into the general waste bins where they can later cause small fires and risks to people at the recycling plants. Equally, we've also seen that we are now seeing in that black general waste stream, around 25% of what people are putting out is actually food waste going into their grey bins, and that food waste should be collected weekly. We should be putting it into our composting, and we should be using it to generate energy and composting. So we do have quite a large improvement plan, which I'd be happy to share with you all at another time or after this meeting if you'd like to see what we're working on this year.
I'm sure the committee or the Policy and Scrutiny Committee would be.
Thank you.
See that. So, colleagues, other questions? Otherwise, I'll pose one myself, if I may. To what extent do we think that fly tipping, of which of course is illegal, antisocial, and whatever, has been driven by the necessary restrictions at our household waste recycling centres, and how far are we from sort of like stepping up that service back to what was before the pandemic broke?
Well, again, I don't think that the fly tipping has been exceeding fairly normal levels on the island. They have in other parts of the country, but not so much on the island. And there are plans to, I'll let Natasha come back in here, there are plans to deal with opening up further the recycling centres.
Yes, Ms. Dix.
Hello again, thank you, Chair and Councillor Hastings. In respect of those two separate questions, can I first just mention the fly tip and total incidents? We do report our fly tipping across not just the Island Roads contracts, but all of our different contracts that collect waste across the island. And as part of that, we report that to DEFRA on a quarterly basis. And what we can tell you is that although we do have seasonal spikes and depressions, as you would expect throughout the year, what we have actually seen is an average trend where in April 15, we were seeing just over 200 fly tips a quarter, dropping to just over 150 per quarter in this year. So although we have had those peaks and troughs that you would seasonally expect, the average trend is still dropping in terms of fly tip across the island. In terms of the HWRC and reopening it, the arrangements that we have in place have been a phased approach to reopening. We had the phase one with the very, very small numbers of people and very restricted access. So we have increased that significantly. And we will be announcing through our media channels and then in the next couple of days our phase 3 approach to getting the general waste back into the tip. And also how the booking system is functioning. In fact, we have received more compliments on the booking system since it's been in place than we've ever received on any element of waste or recycling collection services. So we've seen a really, really strong appreciation from the public in terms of that booking system and the lack of queues and how simple it is for people to arrive on site, know they've got a parking space and leave again. But we will be announcing that final stream of general waste later this week, and when we'll bring in those approaches and phase that into the plant, the tips.
Thank you for that. And I note a comment from Councillor Work. Of course, that fly tipping is indeed driven by antisocial individuals, not necessarily, I'm going to add, lack of waste collection or recycling facilities there. There is some correlation in there. Councillor Lilly would like
Chairman, sorry, may I just add something to that? I'm
yes,
sorry
certainly.
to jump in there. But I just want to praise our waste management team, frankly, for all the work that they've done with that booking system. And it's to such an extent that we are members of the Association of Public Service Excellence, and Natasha recently spoke in front of 40 members of that service to describe what we did, how we did it, so that they can copy our system. So I think, as always, the Isle of Wight leads where others wish to follow.
Certainly, as a user of that system, I would absolutely praise it. It's a very simple system to use, and very helpful in these current times of being able to plan one's life. Councillor Lilly, and then perhaps I might be able to wrap this item up.
Yes, on the back of what you just said, Councillor Hastings, I do wish to put thanks to your team and your management team, and also thank Natasha for all her work in the sort of green agenda and towards climate emergency, because I know there's a lot of additional work on that. So thank you for that. I just want to ask a question about what I call new waste that has come out of COVID, particularly masks and hands, because now I see often in streets, instead of seeing McDonald's wrappers, I'm seeing plastic gloves and masks dropped everywhere. I just wondered what was the increase? What's the of this particular issue, and is it causing particular problems?
Yes, it's the new normal, isn't it? My wife and I went out on a litter pick recently, and yes, we picked up lots of recycling and what have you, but we also picked up lots of masks. So it's just the new wave, isn't it? Natasha, did you want to comment on that?
In terms of littering, we have, as you said, seen that distinct change from the crisp packets and cigarette butts to the personal PPE that people are discarding on the way out of shops. Unfortunately, that is coming into our environment. What is really, really beneficial for everyone to remember is that personal PPE can go straight into a litter bin. It doesn't have to go on the floor. The litter bin is really the place where we'd like to see it. But I'll also use this as an opportunity to say that we are also supporting the Great British September Clean, which is coming up in the next few weeks, and anyone who has a voluntary group that wants to set up a litter pick, we as a waste team do have litter picks and bags available for those litter picks to be set up. So please do get in touch if you want to assist with litter picking over the coming months.
Yes, and I should just briefly add in there that our campaign, whilst strong in itself, has also been joined now by the county press, as you will have seen in the press recently, that they are joining in with our campaign, and I'm very pleased that they are, and we can clean up together.
Indeed.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hobart.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. It's come to my attention recently from local residents writing to me regarding bonfires, which have been caused by householders burning rubbish which should have actually gone to the tip. It's really this as an observation, and particularly irresponsible fires being set to household waste. One result in burning a house down, and I guess a couple of garden sheds went up in fire, particularly during our dry period. I'm wondering why we haven't got any stronger rules and regulations about where and when bonfires can be lit. Just an observation.
Councillor Hastings or an officer? You are currently muted, Councillor Hastings.
Did it all by itself. Yeah, I had that question in my head myself the other day, the other evening, when we had one of our neighbours burning loads of stuff, and we had to shut all the windows. Yeah, and I've been meaning to ask the same question. So whilst we've got Mr. Rowland still here, perhaps you could come in on that and maybe answer something on if you know the answer to that or about the regulations on that.
Mr. Rowland. Taking a moment.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Shall I let Councillor Hobart repeat his question?
And Councillor Hobart, you're muted at the moment, so Councillor Hobart, unmute.
Sorry, I'm muted again.
And you've muted again, I'm afraid. It can double, sometimes it can double tap, so you need to unmute. Councillor Hobart, you need to unmute.
So, Chairman, if I may, I think the issue, Colin, was what are the current rules and regs around bonfires and the allowing of bonfires? I think my recollection is I don't think we have huge powers under environmental health powers, but it's something that you may be able to comment on.
I think the powers that we have is if a bonfire is causing a nuisance to a next door neighbour, or for example, if you're getting smoke in washing, or if it's going into next door neighbours' houses, so it's a statutory nuisance if it can be proved to be so. You can't actually stop bonfires per se, but you can if they're causing a nuisance to your neighbours or to neighbouring people.
So it's some form of abatement notice, I presume, something like that.
Yes.
Anyway. So, colleagues, otherwise, if you have pressing questions on this report, this is in a very, very different sort of tone, in a sense, in terms of, as Councillor Hastings and others have pointed out, this is very much a good news report, and somewhat unequivocally so as well. There are things that I would be particularly interested to see in other reports, like sort of learning from complaints, what is the nature of the complaint and what has been learnt, but that I'll keep for another another time in another avenue. Colleagues, otherwise, I'm sure we welcome the fact that this was volunteered by Mr. Rowland to bring this report, and I think we would want to see this committee continue to receive the report. I think we have two major contracts out there, and it's good to see them side by side and understand the nature of these big contracts as a committee. Otherwise, I have no, from the chair, I have no resolution to put. I would naturally, of course, endorse everything that's been said about the good work being taken by officers in this, particularly during the COVID times. And they are, of course, we have to remember, are continuing, and those arrangements still have to be in place. And if it so happens that the HWRCs can't reopen because we need to put the health and safety of our staff and staff of contractors first, then that is absolutely right. So does any colleague have a resolution they wish to move? Otherwise, we will note the report and welcome that we've had it. Thank you. I see nods. I'm aware that Councillor Kennett has had to leave us, or is about to have to leave us. She did inform me beforehand that she had a pressing engagement afterwards, so she hasn't suddenly dropped offline if she has now left us. The next item I'd like to come to, and again we may take some time on this, is the Cowes Floating Bridge performance issues here. I'm very grateful to the officer for producing the report to support our discussion on this. It's an item that was asked of me by the ward councillor, Councillor Love, if we could pay some attention to that, because of course the issue had been very much in the news for all of us, but it is of particular concern to his ward. Councillor Love, I'll take you sort of as a witness in this sort of kind of evidence session. So I'll ask you first to put your sort of point of view. I may ask you to come back in because, of course, you did raise this with me. I'll exercise my chair's discretion on that. But after that, then I'll take some comments from Councillor Stewart and Councillor Ward. So, Councillor Love, maybe 2 or 3 minutes just to summarise the reason you wanted to see this discussed by Scrutiny today.
Thank you all for allowing me. And just before I say anything, I just want to thank you, Andrew, for your 2 years of chairing this meeting. And I've enjoyed the discussions and listening to them tonight. So first of all, obviously, what I really want to do is focus on the future. That is really, really important. We can spend a lot of time discussing the past if we want, but it's what happens next that really, really matters. So it's now, the floating bridge was taken out of service on the 14th of July, which is now some 8 weeks ago in terms of dates. So, you know, these are unprecedented times and we are facing huge economic impacts with COVID-19. And the floating bridge is an essential part of our island's recovery plan. It is absolutely essential. And so I'll move on quickly because I've got some points written. So with all of that in mind, Councillor Wilcox and Jones Evans and I have been meeting regularly, and we want to put to you some potential solutions because it's about moving forward. And so I put those solutions on the background of what our dear Councillor Dave Stewart said this week, which is, I have come to the conclusions, in my view, I have to question if the floating bridge is fit for purpose as agreed in the contracts. So we finally have a comment from the Isle of Wight Council which allows us to move forward. We have to move forward and so we don't get stuck. So with that in mind, I can tell you that we as a small group were approached about 2 weeks ago by some fantastic leading international procurement experts who have given us some ideas and ways forward, and they are a highly qualified team, and I will share that with the council because I believe that the way forward now is for us to have a cross-party representation to work on this and to move forward. We need solutions and we need them quickly. So the current position, so I want to ask a couple of questions. I've got the report here, paper D, but we've actually moved on since then, haven't we? So, you know, we don't want any more cloak and dagger approaches. What we want to know is what are the problems and what is the fix and what are the solution? And so that's an immediate short-term response. Okay, there has to be a short-term response The other point that I want to make is that my school children and that of those in Cowes are having to cross that river, and there have been huge congestion issues about crossing that river over the last couple of days. What we really need is, and although the council has put on a second launch in the morning, pupils left school at 2:45 and didn't get home till 4 o'clock because of the congestion that now exists. So what we need, please, is a solution, and that solution is a bus that goes around. In the long term, what we really need to be looking at is immediate short-term solutions for this floating bridge. It is clear that it cannot be fixed. And so we either have to do one of two things. We either fix this bridge now in the next couple of weeks, and even sooner if we can, or we get floating bridge 5 back. And I have been in extensive discussions about floating bridge 5. Its engine was running this week. It works. It does not have a hole in it. So let me be clear about that. That is a possible solution. So we need to look at all solutions. In the meantime, in the midterm, we need to be planning for the future and what we're going to do for a long-term replacement. And so we need to do that quickly. We need to get over the fact that it cannot be replaced in the way that we wanted it to. So I'm saying to you that one of the recommendations on paper D, point 15, it should say in the recommendation that I recommend it is scrapped, this floating bridge 6, and that we seek an alternative replacement. That is what that recommendation should say, now that the council has stated its not purpose. So now they've stated that, they need to tell us what they're going to do to replace it.
Thank you, Councillor Love. I took you specifically because you raised the item, but I am aware that Councillor PC Wilcox is present as well. Do you want to add anything briefly to that?
Only really, thank you, Andrew, for giving me that. I'm just really to support Carl in this. I do thank the leader of the council and Councillor Brading, who listened to my my diatribe about the fact that we would have an issue over the 150 kids that were going, and they did put on a second launch. So I am grateful that they did that, but they didn't obviously think about the trip back. I know there's dreadful issues over Southern Vectors as well, taking children to and from school. If parents have got the confidence to send their children to school, there should be a way across. Anyway, all I would like to suggest to the leader, having spent copious amounts of time and seeing the qualifications, the procurement, the highly experienced qualified team that are willing to come on board, some of the stuff that they have said is absolutely outstanding. And I'm sorry, it would be very foolish of this council to turn down a meeting with these guys. They are outstanding. So my plea is, please take the time to have a meeting. They will come to the island. They're here on Friday the 18th, Monday the 21st, and Tuesday the 22nd of September. If a meeting could be done between Carl, myself, Julie at the middle end of, so it's the three of us that are affected, and the leader of the council and who he thinks needs to be there, it would be a massive way forward. Massive. Thank you.
Councillor PC Wilcox, I am aware we've got Councillor Jones Evans, but I'm also a bit aware of the time. So if you don't mind, I'll take Councillor Stewart, who's leading on this, and maybe he'll pass some matters to Councillor Ward as well. So Councillor Stewart, you've obviously heard that, you've seen the report, you've made your own comments in the media. So the floor is yours. What have you got to?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think you can see me actually, and I don't quite know why that is, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Who knows? You can hear me, which is what is most important. And I'll also try and take into account the point made by Cameron Palin, was it? I think you said you'd maybe refer that. We'll take where we go. I'll make a couple of points, but you have to put this in context, and obviously I would take a slightly different perspective to Councillor Love. And can I first of all say, I don't think there is any malice in anything that any of the councillors have mentioned. I think the one common thing we can all agree is we want to see the bridge situation resolved. Because actually for me, although there are some significant figures I will mention to you, this is not about the money. This is about providing a facility particularly for the people from East and West Cowes, the children, the people that live there, and others, to provide that facility and maintain it. There are many who have said, just send the bridge back and we'll do something else. Well, I don't know where they think we're going to send them to, because there's not a museum full of bridges. The Solent Local Enterprise Partnership paid £3.5 million for this vessel. They don't collect floating bridges, but they certainly would challenge us if we weren't using public money in the right way. So the members will know, we're not all of these, but the contract for the bridge was agreed and signed by the previous administration on an outcome-based contract. So that's not on the, if you like, the build, shape, size, etc. It was an outcome-based contract. Things like number of passengers, benefits to the economy, etc. And I understand that. When it arrived in May 2017, I think everybody expected it to work well and provide a good service. The key aspects have been chain depth, noise, and coping with the spring tides, which is why when the peak tides are on, you see that push boat pushing it to keep it level, to keep the chains at the right depth. Now, this is where I would question, and I don't want an answer because you won't have checked this, but my question would be, so does Floating Bridge 5 meet the MMO standards? Because there was never any check of the chain depths on Floating Bridge 5. There is on Floating Bridge 6, because as soon as it came in, the Cowes Harbour Commissioner quite rightly wanted that and has maintained that ever since. We've had other problems. The brow arms broke, the electrical issues when it first went in the water, and most recently, Chair, the issues with the hydraulics. But if we just turn to, and I'll try and deal with Mr. Palin's points on this, some of the facts, and I know you like detail on facts and data. So it's from its introduction in May 17 to date, and that is to July 31st, the income on that floating bridge was 1.9 million, just over, I'll go in round figures. The expenditure in the same period was 3.5 million. So it's cost over the 4-year period, something in the region of 1.5 million pounds. That's the first, and I've got the data behind the audit. More importantly, in that same period, 1.2 million people were able to travel on that bridge, and nearly 500,000 cars managed to get from one end to the other. The average reliability over the 4-year period is something in the region of 94%. And in the 6 months from January to July, it was 99.13% of the agreed schedule. Now, the previous floating bridge for the period May 13 to April 2017 generated £2.7 million. The expenditure, revenue expenditure on the previous floating bridge for the comparable period 13 to 17 was £2.6 million. So in terms of people thinking, well, it's all about making money, it's not about making money because it broke even. This is about providing a service. The summary of the pairs have been laid out, and I think there's some questions that people want to know now. What's the latest position? I'll pick up particularly what Carl said. Can I, on Laura's point, I'm absolutely happy to meet the team, because I'm one that wants to speak to anybody that feels they've got a solution we can take on board and consider. So provided diaries can meet, that's fine. If I say to you, people don't actually know what the cost of Floating Bridge 5 was. So we know because we had a Solent let alone what Floating Bridge 6 was. So we have to be very careful when we think that's a solution. Carl's, maybe he's gone onto it and checked the engine, I don't know. But the important thing I think to say is this: what we want to achieve now is a vessel that is fit for purpose. And Carl's absolutely right, and I've been very upfront. In my view, this vessel hasn't been fit for purpose as agreed in the contract. And we're now proceeding, and this is where we all have to be very careful, with our legal process, which is all in the contract as well. So we have 2 stages. The first stage is the mediation and discussion, which will happen. And then if that doesn't resolve the situation, we end up in court dealing with the actual costs involved. Now, I can't take it further than that on the legal side because I do want to protect the council's position. We did say we would provide a full report, which we have done. I'll ask Councillor Ward as to whether he can share with you the very latest information on the hydraulics, which I know he has because I've read it with him today, but I don't know the public position on that. So I'll ask him to make that consideration, and he has officers who can advise him on that. But for me, what is most important is things like actually that have been read, the kids getting to school. People will remember when the coronavirus kicked in fully, our ferries from, for example, Cowes and Ryde to the mainland were cut right down. And the only way people could get to the mainland from the island at Cowes was to go to East Cowes. And that floating bridge provided a lifeline for a lot of people, including key workers. So when people say, oh, get rid of it, don't do this, don't do that, actually we have to think about what it has done and the positive things. Now, leading on from that, I would just challenge the point that it cannot be fixed, only because of the latest information I have received, which tells me that there is solutions there, and that I'm more interested in how quickly we can get that aspect resolved. So that's where I sit with it. I would just defer to Councillor Ward, but also Colin Rowland as to what we can release from the latest information. And I don't want them to say something they shouldn't, but I'll hand them over now.
Councillor Ward or Mr. Rowland?
I'm certainly happy to give you the latest report on the repair situation. The officers really do keep tabs on the progress of what is going on. They brief me several times a week on where we are. The situation is that a number of hydraulic components were affected by the failure of one or maybe two other hydraulic components. As you can imagine, if you get a mechanical failure, say within a pump and a bearing breaks up, those metallic particles whiz through the hydraulic system and affect the other items in the hydraulic system. So all those hydraulic components had to be removed, stripped down to see what was damaged, what it needed to be replaced, so on and so forth. That process is virtually at its end now, and they found 2 pumps had actually failed and a number of control valves. They were now looking at getting spares to repair those. And strange, I find this difficult to believe myself, but those spares have to be manufactured. I mean, I would have thought a hydraulic pump was a hydraulic pump, and within reason, you pick one off the shelf. But obviously, that is not the case. The vessel is quite unique, so the repair company is dealing with the hydraulic pump companies, and they are looking at producing the spare parts to get all those hydraulic components repaired and back on the craft. They hope to achieve that, and we hope to get the craft back in the water this month. There we go.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ward. Members, questions and proposals, and a reminder that we do still have at least one major item left to discuss this evening. So Councillor Lilly, I think first, and then Councillor Andre.
I take the point of Councillor Love about it's important to find positive solutions, right, to things, but I think it's also important to understand how we got to this sort of point. And I think one of the things is to have availability of the risk registers. I asked for this back in I think it was 2017, and eventually, after some time, with John Metcalf, saw the only available risk register at that time, which did actually have particular issues with the hydraulics or particular things. It was actually brought up at scrutiny at the time, and it was actually said very clearly there were going to be risk registers in place that should be with such a project, and that those risk registers could be available in the future. I think it would be a good opportunity to look at those risk registers, because they will give mitigating strategies, and obviously the outcome of those strategies, and in a sense the mitigating strategies when they haven't worked through this period of time. And I'm going to propose that we perhaps set up a corporate scrutiny subgroup, right, a working group, task and finish group, that's the word I was looking for, to just explore this, and also explore some of the different points that Councillor Stewart has made and other councillors, so that we could actually come back hopefully quite quickly to a future meeting with some clear lessons learned and possibly some positive suggestions of going forward. And I take Councillor Stewart's point, there is sensitivity if you're getting to litigation. So by having a task and finish group that would not meet in public would be a way that perhaps we can discuss certain things that are sensitive, but we can actually come together with finding an agreed way forward. So that, but based on looking at the evidence trail from those risk registers. So that's my proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. I've just note that, of course, the task and finish group can draw its membership wider than the committee's membership, and if the committee is minded to go down this route, then that would allow others with an interest beyond just being members of this committee to be engaged.
Chair, I'll respond. If I respond to that very specific point and probably capture where we're at, because I think you're probably in a similar place to me. We do need to move forward. That was my first point. I agree with Councillor Love. I like the fact that we're looking ahead and not looking back. The facts will speak for themselves. I can't change them, and please don't. I'm not just sitting here saying, "Oh, previous administration's all their fault." That's not the case. What I'm saying is this is the factual timescale. What I am saying is I think there are opportunities to finally conclude and resolve this. But none of us expected and don't yet know fully how the hydraulics will play out. But I have seen the paperwork at Council of Orders on about. I have no problem with, obviously, with a task and finish group. They're always a good thing. However, mindful you must be that there are things that members of the council are fully entitled to know and see, which non-elected members are not. So you choose your team at knowing that. The other thing, and I stress this to all members, we are in the legal process. And you, Chair, more than anybody, know that we have to be very careful because, hypothetically, if the council has a good case and the council wins that litigation process by whatever means, then we want to recover the enormous amount of money that we have spent keeping this service going. I'm sure there'll be a different view from other parties, but that's my view. Most importantly, I want to see the boat back in the water as soon as possible so that we can get on and get our kids to school.
Mr. Metcalfe, quickly.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I fully understand where Councillor Lilly is coming from, but if I could make a plea at this moment in time, I think we've got a significant officer commitment towards the legal action, where we are working very hard to make sure we deliver that, and that really has to be where our focus is in terms of our capacity. I also understand and welcome Councillor Love and Councillor Laurie PC Wilcox's observations, and that may also lead us down a line of work that we're going to ask officers to do. And any task and finish group is clearly going to take officer time and capacity where I don't really think we have it at this moment in time to service it to the degree to which it would need if it's done properly. So if I might make a plea, I understand where Councillor Lilly is coming from, but perhaps we could just postpone and hold on to that thought so we can direct our attention to getting the boat back in the water and building the legal case that we need to do, and also having the conversations that Councillor Love has suggested. So thank you for your time, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Metcalfe. Whilst Councillor Lilly cogitates on that, I'll take Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I would like to have seen within this report is a clear action plan, because I think that's very much what's needed here, together with a time frame. In terms of feedback from residents, I think, along with the recent council leaders' comments, enough is enough. The question that I have is, with regard to the pre-action protocols, would we be, and this might be one for the Chief Exec, would we be prejudicing ourselves in any way if we spend further money on floating bridge? Now, I appreciate this does have to be balanced about having an operational model against obviously the future commitments, and of course that comes along with Councillor Love's very good sort of interpretation of our short, medium and long term. But should we be spending money now if the likelihood is that we will be going for legal action? Would we be prejudicing ourselves?
Chairman, I can answer that in the sense that every action that we have taken for quite a considerable time has been advised by our external legal advisors who are advising on the action. So we are working very closely with them. So we're not doing anything that would put that legal action in jeopardy, if that makes sense.
And if I could just come back on the delivery side, because Councillor Love is right to ask, what are we going to do? My take at the moment is by the end of the month, if all goes well, we will have that vessel back in the water doing what it was intended to do. Our legal action, as a number of you will know, could take some considerable time. But so the priority is getting the vessel back in the water and getting the service on. Now, I have no problem with the meetings. I have no problem with all the other stuff. And I've looked at the past, so I know what's there. But the most important thing is get that service into that community and keep a record of everything we spend for the reasons Councillor Mr. Metcalfe said. And that's the factor where we are. And it does the action plan, Councillor Andre, is get it fixed and get it in the water.
Okay, so
but it would be good to see a time frame along with
that.
that.
And I'd like to think within 4 or 5 weeks.
My hearing is this. I've heard what Mr. Metcalfe says, and he sets out a case that servicing a task and finish group at this time would be particularly difficult. It is obviously an ongoing and pressing issue. So, and I'm sure others would accuse me of being soft on things, but actually what I would propose is that we bring this back to, albeit not under my chairmanship, but the next meeting of Corporate Scrutiny Committee. There seem to be a number of quite fast moving things that actually might overtake a task and finish group. But I throw that out to my colleagues, and if you wish to put resolutions forward, do so. I apologise for the noise behind us now as well.
Can I come back on that? I have listened, and I actually agree with you. I think the availability of information can be, I mean, asking for the risk registers, they're documents that are there. So actually asking those. So all I would request is, yes, we bring it back for consideration at the next scrutiny committee, because then we'll get a report back from Councillor Stewart and the team of where we are with the and hopefully the floating bridge back. But also we'd have gathered some information, and just looking at the risk registers, which all the office has to give. I've got a lot of years of management of risks, so I have the skill to look at risk registers and understand them. Then with that information, we can come back at the corporate, the future meeting, and then decide whether we go to a task and finish group, or it might be that it's not needed, but we will have a better understanding within that. So my proposal is, please could we have access to the risk registers in the meantime, because they're there. And obviously they probably need to be in confidence in actually seeing them, and then we come back and discuss, have a report back on the floating bridge at the next meeting, and then decide whether we need to go forward for a task and finish group. Okay.
Thank you for that. I'm acutely aware of the time, and we do have the E-Tech issue to deal with as well, pressingly. I'm going to, because he asked for the item to come onto the agenda, I'd ask Councillor Love to comment briefly, if you can, Councillor Love, on this. So do come in. I think you are still muted. You're still muted, Councillor Love.
Thank you for allowing me to come back. And whilst I appreciate the conversation, which has actually been quite positive, I think that we've actually had a progressive discussion about this. But even when we have finished resolving this problem, and this is why I say that that we need to start looking now to a definite alternative method, is because we still haven't finished with the depth of the chains, and there are other issues to still be resolved. We're only resolving one issue here, and there are many yet to be. So we need to have that proactive, progressive discussion which looks at alternatives for the future. And the only way to do that, in my opinion, is to make it non-political and for it to be cross-party. And so I would welcome that very much. But so the short-term solution is to get the floating bridge fixed now or replace it with something else. So, and there are, as we've already said, which we can't discuss here, some really creative ideas about how to move forward. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Chair, I think before you take your deliberations, it's important because Mr. Metcalfe has highlighted the resource issue. I think it's three things that I'm more than happy, and maybe there's something we could do more on this, to personally brief Councillor Love and Councillor PC Wilcox, who have both shown a genuine commitment to this issue. They also should be briefed on the project board's work, because the question that he raised about the chains, the noise, and indeed the what I call the push boat, which is costing us £97,000 a year, which by putting on some solutions like side thrusters we will resolve. Those things are all in the pipeline, and we're pushing hard on that. So I think Councillor Love probably isn't cited on that, and I would be happy for him to be cited on that. So I would say, Chair, if and I don't know what the members are going to vote, but would be that the bringing it back to the next meeting is a good idea. Putting a lot of resource in at this time to try and find about the past is probably not the best use of our time, but I'm more than happy if we haven't resolved it at the next meeting in the way that is satisfactory, then that issue can be put forward. I certainly think I should brief Councillor Love and Councillor Wilcox and meet with this group of people. It doesn't cause me a problem.
And I'm sure Councillor Jones-Evans would appreciate that, because
sorry, yeah, I know she's, I'm not quite sure. I know she's Newport, so I didn't know how she fits.
Way, and obviously everything flows otherwise traffic-wise through her ward in particular. So
right, I didn't get the connection there. Sorry, yeah.
So if I may then move that I'll ask Mr. Thistlewood to remind me that we return this item to the next, add it to the work plan for the next corporate scrutiny committee, with the additional request that risk registers and other information be made available to members in those who've expressed an interest in that, and noting, of course, the offers of personal briefings and taking up of meetings that have been made by the leader of the council. Is that seconded? I'll take a roll call vote then. Thank you. It is seconded by Councillor Andre, I saw first. So I'll take it in order of the people on my screen. Myself, 4. Councillor Hobart.
Yes, okay.
That's 4. Councillor Churchman.
4.
Councillor Lilly.
4.
Councillor Andre.
4.
So all in favour of that. The other members have, of course, left so far. I'm going to suggest that we note that the item 5A, the quarterly performance report, a lot of that is affected by the COVID pandemic. So in a sense, the questions would always be caveated by that. So I would suggest we note that that's going to Cabinet, and anybody with particular issues take them up. Otherwise, just aware that we have 13 minutes to conclude our discussions tonight without having to adjourn to another time. So, Councillor Lilly, you are indicating, or were you approving of my proposal? In which case, I will move us past the scrutiny review to the comments on the other items on the Cabinet agenda. It was brought on the Cabinet agenda quite late. The issue of the reports are comprehensive. I will remind members that the appendices on the coloured papers that you've seen in the printed version are exempt and confidential. No reference must be made to them, otherwise we would have to go into private session. I'm not asking for the reports to be introduced because I think they are comprehensive. Councillor Lilly, I think first.
Yes, I mean, simply, it makes a clear recommendation not to give further investment. So from my perspective, it's something that I have argued for extensively, and with the cabinet member, Councillor Stuart Hutchinson. So I'm actually pleased with the recommendation, and I actually support the recommendation, which is option C, not to make any further investment in PTEC at the time. My only real comment is that the actual report doesn't totally sort of make sense to that recommendation, because it's sort of indicating that the PTEC proposal is still viable. I think it's important for members to know that the cost of tidal energy per mega unit is about £150 compared to £40 for solar energy. There's a huge difference within the market, so I do question the viability of the project, but I actually wish to put forward a motion that this committee does support the decision that no further investment is actually made on PTEC within that. I will question the wording in the evaluation, and I'm happy to supply a very for the cabinet meeting any further information about that, because there isn't a real market at the moment for tidal energy, and there's no indication there necessarily would be that. It also refers to EU funding, and actually whether there is going to be accessibility to that EU funding, we don't know. It's very questionable. So I do question the report, but I don't question the outcome, and I wish to put forward a motion that this committee supports that recommendation, that we do not, the Isle of Wight Council puts no further investment into PTEC.
So, Councillor Andre, have you indicated, did I see your hand earlier?
I didn't, Chair, but I would just like to clarify, if I may.
Yes.
Are we just supporting the first option, or are we supporting both recommendations?
Councillor Lilly has put forward a resolution, so he will need to clarify.
I clarified both because E is about the council shareholding being reduced. So in a sense, that enables PTEC to find the money, if they go full forward, from other sources. So I see C and E, right, compatible, because it is about the Isle of Wight Council reducing its liability and its responsibility toward it. It's actually saying to the PTEC company, it's your problem and you have to find the investment and resolution to it. So I'd support both.
Thank you, Chair, for that clarification. So we are supporting both recommendation options C and E. Thank you.
Other colleagues on the committee, bearing in mind, of course, we're not the decision-making body.
No, I'll comment on it when you're ready, Chair.
So I don't see other colleagues indicating. Councillor Stewart, if you wish to comment.
Yeah, so I think actually Councillor Lilly has picked up the heart of this. The key things we need to remember, obviously, £1 million of public money was invested in the PTEC project. The council's motive and direction was about jobs and the economic benefit. I'm very excited, I'm sure Councillor Lilly is, on the green position of tidal energy. The tides come in and out every day. That's how it is. And they don't worry about wind and other things. There is a government consultation publicly out at the moment on what they call contract for difference, which is the point that Councillor Lilly rightly highlights in terms of what subsidies and things they can put on. As a fact, solar takes a lot of land up. Councillor Lilly be familiar with that as well, because we see them all over the island in the panels. I don't think it's. There is a thing called the Tiger funding. I won't go into the detail on it, but there are ways in which that can be achieved. However, as responsible leaders in the council, we also have to think about the back. We're just in, and we're not gone over. We are in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic. We have had to invest significant amounts of our reserves to keep our island safe. And that has to be the number one priority for me anyway. That's how I see it. So to spend £250,000, which we may need on this at this time, is the matter that the Cabinet have got to discuss. And those are the kind of recommendations that are there. Now, there are strong views on all sides and probably in the public as well. But the most important priority for me is that we do the best we can to protect our investment, but at the same time, we focus on what is important to the island. Now, Councillor Lilly has picked it up quite rightly that we hold at the moment a number of shares in this company, and because it wasn't all about the shares, if it means that PTEC can gather their funds through alternative means and that we retain a minimal level as outlined in the paper, but that they can proceed with this, that's fine. But the recommendation is that first of all, we do not make any further investment in PTEC at this time. And that secondly, if they can raise the required funds by selling 2/3 of the council shareholding in the company, which I think we have 15%, you could go on the public and see it, then we would be down to 5%. And that's exactly, Michael was absolutely spot on, has picked up what is being recommended. And that is what we will decide at Cabinet. But I would welcome Scrutiny's view because these are big figures. And I just want to reassure the public that we haven't stepped away from our green direction. We're encouraging it.
Are there any other contributions from other members? I would say myself that I would endorse Councillor Lilly's view on this, which is to support that we would endorse the Cabinet going ahead as the recommendations show. There is a danger of what's called the sunk cost fallacy, chasing money with money, whereas this seems to be a sensible means of trying to square a very difficult circle. So Councillor Lilly has put forward a resolution, proposed resolution that the committee endorses the recommendations to be made to Cabinet, something like that. Is that right?
Yes, I've my resolution is to support the recommendation of option C and option E.
Thank you for that. It's seconded. I see Councillor Churchman, Councillor Andre. I'll take a roll call vote in the usual way. So myself as chair is for. Councillor Hobart.
Yeah, C and E. Yeah, I support that.
4 from Councillor Hobart. Councillor Churchman.
4.
Councillor Lilly.
4.
Councillor Andre.
4.
That's unanimous in supporting that. We can, of course, go beyond time by resolution, but if we, Councillor Quirk would have supported. Technically, he's not a member, but he's indicated he would have supported it as well. Technically, he's not a member because he's not properly present at the moment, sadly, Councillor Quirk. But I have noted that and read that out. Otherwise, we've got on our agenda the scrutiny review paper. That I will move that we note that it is a record of all the work done by across the scrutiny function.
Noted.
Over the last 18 months. Colleagues, do you wish to add anything at this stage on the forward plan and the work plan? Both are before you as papers. Otherwise, we could note that at the moment, bearing in mind, colleagues, there may be a change in membership in the next 10 days. Certainly, there is one to be had. Not myself. So can we note those, and then those members who are on the corporate scrutiny after the annual general meeting can pursue those items? Noted. Noted. There are no members' questions, as far as I understand. I'm checking with officers here. So very briefly, I have failed you all completely. I've brought you right up to the wire on time again. That of course, is because of your interest in the items before us, and I think it shows that corporate scrutiny is a vital part of the structures here. I'd love scrutiny personally to be resourced a great deal more. I have greatly enjoyed being chair of scrutiny. I know that I've not been the grandstanding chair that others might want to have. I do not see scrutiny as purely about opposition. It's about being that critical friend. I hope we struck the right note of being critical at the right times. I would love to meet every week and delve into all the data, as Councillor Stewart would know. I want to pay particular thanks to 3 people. My Vice Chair, Councillor Lilly, who has been an immensely valuable resource to me as a sounding board advisor all the way through this. To Megan Tuckwell, who has serviced this committee so efficiently and kept me on track so many times. And to Mr. Thistlewood, Paul Thistlewood, what an asset this council has. He does in 3 days the work of 3 people, I think, and I just place on record my thanks to them for that, and my thanks to everybody who's engaged with this committee civilly and with candour and transparency. I'm sure things will improve under the next chair, but I hope I've left it in a good state to be handed on to. Otherwise, that's it for my final corporate scrutiny committee. Councillor Lilly, you wish to say a word and you have about 30 seconds to do so, but the last word goes to Councillor Lilly.
I wish to thank you for your 2.5 years service of the Scrutiny Committee, and to thank for your due diligence, your enthusiasm, your exactness, particular for data, good humour, and for actually helping us robustly dig deep in certain questions. I think you bring a very strong view to the word critical friend, and I think that we have, as a council, benefited from your input. So I wish to my colleagues to come together to actually thank you, right, for all you've done.
And I'm noting the time, so I'll go away and have my ego deflated somewhere, and I'll see you all one way or another, hopefully in physical life at some point. Stay safe, stay well, keep up the good work, both for scrutiny and for delivering for this council. And I'll close the meeting at that point at exactly 3 hours from its start.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Andrew.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. You're welcome.